Well, good evening. Let me give you an update on the tropics, specifically a brand new, well, not brand new, it was named this morning, but a tropical storm that wasn't supposed to form, and I would argue never really did form, was officially named earlier today on Saturday. Now, as we're going into Saturday evening, even the National Hurricane Center is saying, well, maybe we jumped the gun a little bit, but we'll talk about that. So let me give you a general breakdown. What we're talking about with, quote, Colin, whether it is or not, is down here, this really elongated, that looks nothing like, if you look up on the internet, a tropical system. I'm not even talking a hurricane. You know, hurricanes look like donuts with the hole in the middle. They're pretty classic, easy to tell, something like this. But a tropical storm tends to look somewhat similar. That looks nothing like it. Meanwhile, to the north, you say, well, what's all that? That's actually a cold front. That's bringing some severe weather in northern parts of Virginia on up toward areas of Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And that front, as it drops down, will bring us a couple of isolated thunderstorms here locally tomorrow. Meanwhile, what it's doing now, the flow out ahead of it, is picking up this, whatever it's called, off the coastline, or actually inland, and taking it northeast pretty slowly, right now at about 7 miles per hour. That's the other thing. They said that it formed early this morning over land. Tropical systems don't form over land. They just can't do it. You need the warm water to add fuel to them. And we'll talk more about a couple of other things that just don't really match with it. Meanwhile, as of 5 o'clock anyway, they even admit they think that 40-mile-per-hour sustained wind is too high right near the center, which is where you're supposed to have the strongest winds in Wilmington, North Carolina. The top winds were gusting to about 25 miles per hour, so nowhere near that. 34.0 north, 78.6 west, moving northeast at about 7 miles per hour. So the orange area, tropical storm warnings, and that means you have to have sustained winds of 40 miles per hour. The odds of that happening are very, very, very low. You'll probably have a couple of gusts maybe in a thunderstorm, but I do not expect any sustained winds of 40 miles per hour. Meanwhile, by tomorrow afternoon, I have a feeling they won't even be calling it that anymore. It'll be whatever's left of it working offshore. And again, all the strongest storms, the strongest winds, and they're not even all that strong, are well offshore. So here are 3 things you need to know. No effects locally, and I mean here in Hampton Roads, from what I'm calling not really Colin. Also, no sustained winds, as I just said, of tropical storm force strength for the Outer Banks. You might see a gust of 40. If that, basically, it's just like a summer cluster of thunderstorms that you get dozens and dozens of times per year. So what is it really? Well, as I said, meteorologists, what we call Mets, we've all talked, we're texting back and forth, you know, interacting on social media, and we all agree it's not a tropical storm. The official forecast, again, says it is. But if you were watching earlier, for example, on the Weather Channel, the guy there basically said, I'm not sure what they're talking about. This is not one that, you know, hurricane expert even there. So remember the saying, if it looks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, et cetera, it's a duck. Well, the opposite is true. You know, you can say if it looks like a tropical storm, it acts like a tropical storm, it has the basic characteristics of a tropical storm, it's a tropical storm. Well, the opposite is true. If it doesn't look like a tropical storm, doesn't have the same characteristics, it's not a tropical storm. What do I mean by that? Strongest winds are not at the center. They never have been. You really need that to be a tropical system. Also, one of the biggest thing is you need to have the storms at the center. You can have a sheared system where maybe one side of it doesn't really have any thunderstorms and one side of the center or eye will. There are nor have there ever been any storms, what we call convection, near the center of this system. A couple of other areas we were watching. Remember yesterday we showed this and said 10% chance it becomes a tropical system. Well, everybody's like, ho, 10%, it turned into one. Well, not really. It never did. It didn't change the forecast. Everything we expected to happen with it in terms of the weather effects were identical to what we had been saying. They just, for whatever reason, decided to give it a name. This one's still very low chance, about 10% as it works its way across the Windward Islands. And this, very unusual, not so much to have a storm, this one's Bonnie, by the way, that came across Central America, but to stay enough in terms of its overall organization to still be labeled as Bonnie. often, and that doesn't happen often, but when they sort of hit the mountains and everything, the higher train, they fall apart and then they are renamed. So we were saying this one might, fall apart enough that it comes back out, reorganizes, and is renamed Darby. Well, that's not the case. This is being called Bonnie, as it held its tropical characteristics coming across Nicaragua and is now, again, moving offshore. It was also rather unusual in that it was so far to the south, grazing across South America. And then it continued, as I said, basically near the border of Costa Rica and Nicaragua, and is now just emerging off the coastline and heading offshore. So that's your tropical update. And we hope you'll join us. We'll be on with a regular forecast again tonight on 13 News Now at 11.